Should we censor music? Let's consider. Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher's Show, where we consider the greatest questions of human history. Today, we're still filming from Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I'm still on vacation, still at my mother-in-law's house. The point of laws are to make the right kind of society, and in Plato's Republic, he considers the perfect kind of society and what kind of laws would get that perfect kind of society. And eventually, he gets to the role of art in a society, and quickly comes to the conclusion that art needs to be heavily censored. Now, in this video, I'm not going to tell you that I think that we should or shouldn't censor art. Instead, what I'm going to do is present Plato's arguments in the most plausible way possible. So it's going to look like I'm arguing for censorship, but that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to make it make sense. So here goes. Arguably, the most important people in Plato's Republic are the guardians. And he says that they are dedicated wholly to maintaining the freedom in the state. So that is their job. It's one of the most important jobs in the state. And in order to do so, they need to be shaped into the kinds of people that can do so. So, for example, they can't be cowards and defend freedom, right? They need to be virtuous people. They need to be molded into people that are courageous, that are virtuous in general, in order for them to do the job that they need to do to make this perfect society. Art presents an interesting challenge / opportunity for him. And he especially focuses on music. And we'll talk about that then. And music, he incorporates in there, by the way, poetry and literature for some reason is underneath the category of music. And for two reasons. The first reason, or at least two reasons I can discern. The first reason being that he says rhythm and harmony get into the inward parts of the human soul. And by that, I think he means that the type of music you listen to affects who you are. So if you listen to hardcore rap or you listen to heavy metal, that puts you in a particular kind of mood, right? And I'm not talking about the lyrics or anything just yet. I'm just talking about the heaviness of it, the excitement of it. Whereas if you listen to smooth jazz, that puts you in a different kind of mood. So arguably, if you listen to one type of music over and over again, and that's all you listen to, that's gonna, change your mood significantly. That's gonna change who you are and the way you are. Second, the lyrics tend to seep into your mind. So if somebody presents you with an opinion, you're not likely to just accept that opinion. If somebody even presents you with a rational argument for that opinion, you are hesitant to believe it. But if you listen to your favorite band or your favorite rapper or something like that, and you keep listening to it over and over again, and it presents you with a specific viewpoint, then you're much more likely to just accept that viewpoint. And I believe this is so because this is what happened to me. When I was in high school, I loved Digable Planets, still love Digable Planets, but I listened to their politics and pretty much accepted it wholeheartedly without even questioning it. And I didn't question it until I got older and I started, getting more philosophy. And why is this? Well, music and literature and art in general appeals to the passions that you have and not to your rationality. At least this is what Plato contends. And when I say passions, by the way, I don't mean the passions that you have. I mean the emotional, non-rational side of you, right? They appeal to something that is unthinking in you. Think about, for example, how people are at concerts. Do you go to a music concert and sit there and just consider and, oh, that's an interesting point there. I wonder what he means by that. No, you get into a certain vibe and everybody gets into that. And the more lost you get into that vibe, the better the concert is. Now, possibly there's nothing wrong with that, but is that the good way to get at truth? No, that seems to be a very unthinking way to get at truth. So that seems to be a way that we should avoid, and especially if we're talking about the best way to secure freedom in a society, then that seems to be something that we need to get right. Now, one possible objection you could have here is, yeah, but what about literature, right? Literature was considered underneath the guise of art in general, and music in this case. And literature has rational arguments. So wouldn't that be a case of a way to get at truth? Yes and no. There are rational arguments in literature. However, Plato is pointing out that there is an aspect of literature that is non-rational, and that's the aspect that puts you into a story, right? So like he specifically talks about narration versus like first person perspective. You're imitating, like being like the person. And so if you are reading, let's say, a story where or it's being acted out where you are like the character rather than being just told what the character is, and you're getting put into the character's situations, you're going to have these emotional, visceral reactions, and they're going to affect your judgment, and it's going to be emotional versus rational, right? It's not, even if there are going to be rational arguments presented in there is still going to be this confusing emotional response that you're going to have. And as proof of this, they could have just given you the rational argument instead, right? What does the story do instead? The story presents something additional, and that additional thing is this irrational part. So for Plato, that's something that we need to avoid. Or not avoid, but at least something that we need to get right. So here is his argument for censorship of music and art in general. The state guarantees freedom for its citizens, and the guardians are the ones who guarantee the freedom in the state. To do so, it's necessary to design a society so that guardians are virtuous. But art has potentially good or bad effects on human character, so it's necessary to only allow art that has good effects on human character so that we can have this virtuous guardians securing our freedom. So what kind of art are we talking about here? Well, he says, never stories that make it seem like it's profitable for you to do the wrong thing, and that people who do the right thing are getting one pulled over on them, right? Especially never stories that make it seem like it's profitable for you to do the wrong thing when you don't get caught, right? Now, I know that may seem like, where would we hear the stories like that? Imagine songs that made it sound like it was good to sell drugs and to treat women poorly and to get involved in gang violence as long as you got away with it. I know it's hard to imagine, but imagine that there was music like this. This would be the kind of music that Plato says is deleterious to human character. And if it's going to be like that, then we're not going to be able to have if we're going to get guardians, right? We're not going to be able to get guardians that are virtuous if this is the kind of music they're listening to. Also, he says no lamentations or strains of sorrow. In other words, no sad boy music, right? Emo is right out. He doesn't want music that makes it seem like the whole world is sad and everything sucks, because those kinds of songs are going to make it so that your guardians are just depressed and not courageous, and we want them to be courageous. He even has a rule that we're not going to have songs or stories that give us over to excessive laughter. So, it gets kind of excessive here with these rules. Excessive laughter, because these fits of laughter are things that would give us over to too much emotion rather than to have our rational faculties. And that sounds crazy, but I will say that when we're trying to look for truth, one way that is significantly tricky is if you are arguing with somebody and if they can make a joke that makes everybody laugh, it seems like they're right, even if they're wrong about the argument, right? Even if they get the argument wrong, if they can pull a one-liner on you or something, everybody laughs and it seems like, they win, right? So it is the case that laughter at times can be anti-rational, and that may be something to watch out for. I don't know. I'm just trying to make this look as plausible as possible. Along with the lyrics, he's not just talking about the lyrics, he's also talking about the harmonies and the rhythms. The harmonies and the rhythms are supposed to follow the words. So with those lamentations or strains of sorrows, he doesn't want any, for example, like, again, no emo music, right? So even if there were no lyrics, he wouldn't want the sad boy style of music, even if it was instrumental. He wants music that you would listen to, that, for example, if you were in the middle of a battle and you needed strong resolve and it would give you courage, that kind of music, so I don't know, maybe like We Are the Champions by Queen or something like that. Or he also admits of music that is to be listened to at times of peace and freedom. Another rule he has is that music must be beautiful and graceful. He says, then our youth will dwell in the land of health amid fair sights and sounds. And in fact, he says the goal of music is the love of beauty. So this is an interesting idea that is tied to our study of aesthetics, which is what is beauty and what is the purpose of beauty. And for Plato here, he says that the love of beauty is the purpose of music. So why is the love of beauty so important? That is a question that we need to explore separately. But it seems like the love of beauty is tied to human well-being. So in order to garner that well-being, we need to foster it with the right kinds of music. So we don't want ugly music. We want music that is beautiful. So in that regard, he might outlaw stuff like punk music. And I like punk music, but it is ugly on purpose. Although maybe, there's some ways, I don't know, like sometimes a thing is beautiful in an ugly way. So maybe we could convince him that, there are some types of music that, even though they sound ugly at first, eventually, like you can see how they're beautiful. I don't know, but I think likely he would not be down for that. Another rule, simple narration is best. This is kind of an odd one. So in talking about literature, and it feels like we're going all over the place talking about literature versus music because they seem so distinct, but again, he treats them underneath the same heading. So we want stories that are typically going to be just narration and not you being part of the story, like not you being first person perspective character in the story. And the only time he wants that is if the first person perspective is virtuous. And why is this? Well, it's because it seems like you become like the thing that you imitate, right? So if you imitate somebody that's unvirtuous and you do it often enough, then you might become unvirtuous yourself. And this may seem like a bit of a stretch, but for great actors that are totally given over to their craft, a lot of times, like take Orson Welles, he got so wrapped up into his characters, it changed the kind of a person that he was to where he wasn't really sure who he was at the end of his time. He went a little crazy. And it seems like that constant imitation, that constant, putting yourself in another person's perspective so deeply, could affect who you are. So we don't want those kinds of stories unless we're putting ourselves in the place of virtuous people, because then that's going to, foster the virtuousness in ourselves. But in stories, there are going to be plenty of unvirtuous people. So it's probably best, Plato says, to stick to simple narration, where you're just telling what happened and who did what and stuff like that. A final rule we'll talk about is lying. Are we allowed to lie in art? And this discussion is going to be a little bit oblique, because it starts off really talking about art in theology, and specifically art in Homer. You know, like Homer depicts the gods acting really funky. You know, they're doing some messed up things, and Plato has in his Republic, he's considering, should we have our art depict things like that? So even if it's simple narration, should we depict the gods doing things like that? And he says no. First of all, he says that's not the way God is. God is not the cause of evil things, so we should never depict him like that. And it's most important, he says, because neither God nor man likes to be deceived about the highest things in their souls. So the realm of the divinity, that's the highest thing. So we don't like to be deceived about that. That's one of the utmost things that we don't want to be deceived about. So he says this is one of the most important places where we should not be lying. And the goal, he thinks, of art in theology at least, is to have our people respect gods, respect their parents, and to cherish their friendships. So if that's what our goal is, and we're depicting the gods as, backstabbing friends, or as killing their own parents, or as just evil gods in general, then we're going to be inspiring in people to do the opposite of those things. So we should never lie about God and say that he's doing bad things. We should always say that he is only the cause of good things. Or so Socrates says in Plato's Republic. So I should have said at the very beginning, this is all Socrates talking to somebody in Plato's dialogue, which is interesting if you think about it, because he's saying that we should only do narration, and it's actually Socrates and this guy, and they're narrating it, right? So he's kind of showing you this is the way things should be. In any case, he extrapolates his conclusion to say you should just never lie in art in general, and that's something that we should disallow as a state, right? We should not allow people to lie in art. He says, interestingly enough, though, and this is a little bit off topic, I guess, but he says that sometimes lying is actually helpful when you're lying to humans. So it's helpful to lie, let's say, to your enemies, right? To tell them, hey, we're over here when you're actually over there. Or sometimes it's helpful to lie to your citizens. So for example, when somebody's going crazy and they want to harm themselves, and you say, I don't know where the gun is, when you actually know where the gun is. But he says that this should be reserved for only the rulers of the state, in the same way that only the physician should be able to prescribe medicine, which is a lot of trust in government officials. I don't know that I would be down to just say that they're allowed to lie to me. Now, possibly the big objection that you might have here that is not considered in the text is that this seems actually to go against freedom, right? The whole point was that we were supposed to be securing freedom, right? But it sounds now like that we've got these rules in place, and Plato is saying we want to enact these rules at the state level, stuff like no sad songs, stuff like no funny songs, no funny stories, right? Stuff like only simple narration. That sounds crazy, man. That sounds like a lot of freedom lost. But the whole point was to have this in order to secure freedom. So isn't this contrary to what we're trying to do? And the reason this objection just never shows up is because we're actually dealing with two different ideas of freedom: a modern idea of freedom and an ancient idea of freedom. So the modern idea of freedom would be that freedom is the ability to just do whatever you want. So that is just to fulfill your desires. That is the idea of freedom. But think about that. Freedom is defined based on your desires. In the ancient world, they would see that as slavery. You're a slave to your desires. Your desires make you do certain things that you don't want to. You become a slave to your belly, as they say. So for example, there's the marshmallow test, if you guys ever remember that, where kids are given a marshmallow, and they're told, if you don't eat your marshmallow before I get back, I'll give you another marshmallow for free. and some of the kids can't wait and they eat their marshmallow and then they don't get the free marshmallow. Those kids are a slave to their desires, right? It would behoove them to master their desire for that marshmallow and wait, and then they would get more good, right? But they can't because they're a slave to their desire. So if the idea of freedom is freedom to do what you desire, then that's not the freedom he's talking about. The freedom that Plato's talking about is the freedom to do what truly makes you happy. And part of that is the ability to master your desires. And the other part of that is the ability to be virtuous, right? Once you become the virtuous person, then all of a sudden you become a happy. Think about it. The courageous person is a happy person. He's not scared and he's not doing dumb things. He's a courageous person. This is a little bit of Aristotle plus at Plato, but they're pretty close in this. So the whole point of the guardians then is to secure this perfect society and the freedom in the society, and the freedom in the society is going to make these citizens that are happy. And if that's what our goal is to have happy citizens, then this kind of freedom would be best secured with, Plato says, this heavily censored art. So now the question, should we censor art and music and things like that, literature? And that's a lot spicier of a meatball. I have to say, I don't trust the government to get this right. I think there's way too much politics that are to be played so that people would censor things that go against what they want, and so censoring voices that are dissent, and that's definitely not what we want in America. At least that's one of the things that we're against. But as Plato says, we also can't just let children listen to just any stories, right? We can't let them listen to stories where it sounds like bad things lead to good results, right? We don't want children to grow up thinking, oh, well, every story I hear says that what the valuable thing to do is to just do the wrong thing, and then I'm gonna get the money that I want. I'm gonna be a happy person. And for us, with the ease of access, with internet and phones that kids have available to them, it might be necessary to censor something like that. I don't know. We already censor foul language. Maybe we should censor more? I'm not saying that we should. I'm just considering. Further, Plato has a good argument, I think, in pointing out that we need the right types of people to secure freedom. So for us in the United States, we get our military members just from the civilian population. And if the civilian population is not a virtuous population, then we won't have virtuous people in our military. And in order for us to have a good military, to be able to secure freedoms, we need virtuous people, right? We need courageous people. We need honest people. I mean, we're entrusting them with the ability to kill others. We're entrusting them with the job of laying down their lives to protect our lives. So we're trusting them with a lot. That means that these people need to be of the utmost virtue, right? And I was in the military, right? So I know the kinds of people that are there now, and I shudder to think of what would happen if we didn't have such high virtuous people. That would be very scary, but it would be something that, if the population became wild enough, I don't know, maybe that would be possible. If we were to allow people to influence this general population to be unethical enough, then possibly we could lose our freedoms, possibly we could lose the integrity of our armed services. And I think in the United States, we're so far removed from threats of violence that we just get totally, we're in our own world thinking that kind of stuff can't happen to us, but it can happen as fast as Nazi Germany happened. We've been very lucky to have a good armed service. If you look at South America, there are military juntas like every other day. My mom is Bolivian, so we'd go down to Bolivia all the time when I was a kid. and it was like there was a new revolution every time we were down there. So it's crazy, you know, like the military has got so much power, they could do whatever they want. If we haven't trained them to be virtuous, then they really should just look at it as, hey, we got all the power, let's take over, and then we'll have all the stuff. Don't get me wrong, by the way, I don't think that's actually the way they should think. I agree with the ancients in thinking that virtuousness leads to happiness. So I don't think that they would be happy doing that. I just think that given a certain mindset, given an unethical, unvirtuous mindset, that would be the plausible thing to think. And I think you'd be wrong, but I think that that's something that if they were unvirtuous, that they would believe. So Plato has a good point there, but at the same time, I mean, it's hard to imagine a society with so much censorship. There are things that I love personally that wouldn't make the cut in Plato's society. So, for example, I'm given over to excessive laughter. I love Dumb and Dumber, the movie, and I laugh excessively. That probably would not make the cut in Plato's society. Also, like I said, I love ugly things sometimes, like punk music. It would be hard to give those things up. Would it be the right thing to do? I don't know. To me, it seems hard to conceive of a system like this, but maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, what do you guys think? Assume this kind of censorship would build virtuous people, and the virtuous people would be the happy people. So we would have a happier society. Would it be right to censor art, or would it still be wrong? What do you think? Anyway, let me know in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next video. Adios.